All right, looks good on my end. So we are live for the 27th episode of the Business of Family and Selling. I'm Brendan Allen Barrett, and I'm joined today by Darryll Stinson. Darryll is a guy who has had some setbacks, has went away to school with full ride scholarship to play football, and had the dream of playing professional football. And when his career ended with a knee injury, that dream was finished. That dream was done, and that sent Darryll into some dark days, even to the point of contemplating suicide and having to be admitted to a hospital to help him deal with that. And that's where he realized that his life was worth fighting for. You know, that's over 6 years ago now. And Darryll's here today, a happily married man, a father of two wonderful girls. Darryll, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brendan.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us back. Your work today, you're a pastor, you own a marketing consultancy, and business. You consult folks on marketing and public relations. You do quite a bit of public speaking. But your biggest passion project, it sounds like, is helping other athletes transition out of sport and into the general population, or at least deal with that transition out of sport to focusing on other things. Tell us a little bit of how that came to be. I would imagine it started with your own experience transitioning out of football.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. So I am an executive pastor at Life Church International in Duluth, Georgia. I oversee outreach and assimilation at our church, basically helping the guests feel welcome and help them grow while they're here. And that's an honor. I've been doing that officially now, I guess, for about maybe a week or so, but unofficially for the last 2.5 months. So they just kind of went live with the new structure this week. So we're excited. The vision moving forward is great, enormous, and really excited about what God's doing here. As far as the athlete ministry goes, I consider it a venture. It's something that I'm building right now and want to kind of get full-time, part-time, have that be my focus because there's such a need out there for athletes. And the way that I got into that, you could obviously go to my GoFundMe page, gofundme.com/athlete ministry. But yeah, it started just like most people start out playing sports the ages of 7. I think that I started earlier than that. My father played at Central Michigan University, and he always encouraged me to be athletic and played. He never really pushed me hard, but it was definitely something that he would do as an activity with me. And I just developed a passion for it. And I was the guy that growing up, because I was smart and intellectual, I grew up in Jackson, Michigan, and I was in leap classes, right? And so in my school, when you're in leap classes, all your friends are Caucasian, and like you're like the only black guy. And so I didn't know any better. I didn't know it was even an issue or a thing until I got around middle school and I started to see that my African-American brothers weren't so happy about my Caucasian friends. They thought I was kind of a sellout. They thought I talked too proper. And so I was torn between the two groups. Like I loved hanging around family and I loved hanging around friends who were African Americans, but also Caucasian and other nationalities, but those were the predominant ones in my school. And really athletics became that centerpiece where I didn't have to worry about fitting in with the white crowd or the black crowd, because as an athlete, people just gravitated towards me. They didn't care whether or not I talked proper or not. They just were happy that I was scoring points. And so, my identity became just really involved and wrapped around athletics. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Central Michigan University on a full ride scholarship, and man, I got coaches sitting down with me telling me, man, look, I coach NFL athletes and you have the potential to be great. You have the potential to make it and be awesome at it. And so I'm like, sweet, and I developed that. Well, unfortunately, my going into my sophomore year, I was trying to out squat somebody, an upperclassman, and I just pinched a nerve in my back, and me not knowing any better, being high pain tolerant, that pain continued for almost a whole summer until the only way I noticed was, I had pain and stuff, but I just kind of ran through it. But my whole left leg, I just slapped it, and it was like jello. It was like, what is wrong? And so I finally got an MRI and checked it out, and the doctor was like, "Listen, this is atrophy from your sciatic nerve being pinched." And he's like, "If you don't have surgery soon, you're gonna be paralyzed in your left leg."
Wow.
And it was so serious that, man, that was Saturday I got the results, or either Friday or Saturday I got the results. He did the surgery on his off day on a Sunday.
Wow.
Right, because it was like he was that concerned about me. And so, man, I came back when I shouldn't have, and I took all these pain pills and epidural injections, acupuncture. What did I do? I did nerve killings. You name it, I did it, just to be able to come back and play again. And athletics was like, no, no, no. We don't want you to put your body at risk. And so I signed a liability waiver because this thing was my identity. It's who I was. I didn't know anything else other than
Mm-hmm.
and it's how I got my validation. It's how I felt good about myself. And so finally, after going through all that pain for about 2 years of epidural injections, those things I told you about, and just killing my body, the coaches were like, "Look, I know you signed a liability waiver, but this is too much." So they didn't let me continue my senior year. That
Wow.
devastated me, man. And I didn't fight too much because I was in pain. I couldn't even stand up straight at that point.
Yeah.
And so, man, I went through the serious, darkest depression of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I became very suicidal. I would drink like whole fifths of alcohol and drive my car just hoping that I would get in a life-ending accident. Man, I would take multiple drugs at the same time. I would try to starve myself and go as long as possible. Man, I never built up, I guess, the courage to pull a trigger or anything, but I definitely contemplated a few times. And
Sure.
I went from 275 pounds to 219 pounds because in 4 weeks I was trying to starve myself to death.
Wow.
And finally, one day, man, I just kind of just I had a girlfriend at the time who I was dating for 4.5 years, was a high school sweetheart. Found out that she was dating another guy, and so, man, I got sports that's going. I got this girl who was kind of like my comfort that's going. I've got nothing, and so I'm like, man, I'm trying to end this thing. I'm ready to just take my life. And so I drank some alcohol, smoked some weed, turned my car on, and I started driving 75 miles per hour on a 35-mile-per-hour road, just getting ready to drive onto an intersection highway and end it all. I mean, I was like raging. And on my way driving, I drove past a church that I had attended once before. And I knew the name of the church, but I didn't know they were at the location that I drove past. And my heart just softened because God said, "Hey, that's a part of your future." And I'm like, "What?" And so my heart softened. I picked up the phone, or I looked at my phone. It was ringing. My mother was like, "Hey, you need to come and to Detroit, Michigan, and I need to get you some help." And I don't know. I don't even know how she knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
So I drive all the way to Detroit. She tried to get me to eat something. Didn't really happen. And man, she had to admit me into a psychiatric unit. And that's where my life sort of changed forever. And that's where the burden and the passion that you asked me about really started to that's where it was birthed, was in the psychiatric unit. Because while I was being admitted there, I was just crying. The doctors were trying to get me to explain why I wanted to take my life, and I just said, "Leave me alone. I just want to die. Let me kill myself, blah blah blah." And the doctor left for a second, and a nurse came through the door. I never seen this nurse's face because I had been crying so hard that my eyes were basically swollen shut, and I could
Mm-hmm.
see just out of the bottom of them, just a slant. And so I call her the lady with green pants. And so she comes in the room and she says, "Hey, I don't know who you are, and I don't even have jurisdiction to be back here because they don't allow people back in this unit. But God sent me back here to tell you that you need to say yes to him." And I just broke down and just cried, man, because I couldn't believe what was happening. And she prayed for me and prayed for me, and I just kept screaming, "I want to die, I want to die, I want to die." And then finally, I just heard God say, "Just would you say yes to me?" And so I just said yes. I just said, "Yes, Lord." And when I said it, man, I don't know how else to describe it besides that depression I was feeling just
Mm-hmm.
lifted off of me, and literally my eyes got healed. I could open them again. I felt hope again because I knew that if this God of the universe would come meet me in a place where I was trying to take my life, that surely there was something worth living for. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is where I kind of said, like, man, although I don't have sports, there's something outside of this life, outside of this sports life for me, or else God would have just let me die.
Yeah.
So I went on this journey of figuring out who I was, figuring out my identity, discovering my purpose, still struggling and with the tug and pull of feeling like, you know, athletics was the best part of my life, and trying to believe that there was something better than that. Not just that there was something different, but something better. And it was just a long, maybe 4-year journey of just learning how to be somebody else other than an athlete, and learning who I was, my skill set and everything. And so once I kind of learned through that process, again, I did the marketing consulting thing, pastored for a little while, done tons of ministry, public speaking, worked for Central Michigan University doing marketing, worked at United Way doing fundraising, just did a ton of stuff. And finally, when God called me down to Georgia about 3 months ago, he said he wants me to build this athlete ministry. And so I had already had some plans in place, but I immediately started to write an ebook, which is scheduled to be published and available for the public December 1st. And so I'm really, really excited.
Yeah.
And so that's where that passion comes from. It's really just helping people learn the lessons that I learned. Because when I looked for information, I couldn't find any. I mean, I went to NCAA, I went to coaches, I asked friends, and people didn't really talk about it. And the best help that I got is just like, man, it's rough, you know, like it's just is what it is. And I wouldn't accept that. That's a horrible way to live, like this. And so, I mean, there was a few articles out there, but definitely nothing as, I don't know, complete, as robust as what I'm offering to the public. So what it is I'm trying to help people not take 4 to 5 years, or some people I know that are in their 60s, 70s, and it's still a struggle for them. I don't want it to take the rest of your life for you to discover that there's something better for you.
Well, I think what you found with athletes is things that people, you know, in all walks of life struggle with, right? They've experienced some setback. They have this vision for their life, and that exact vision is no longer possible for one reason or another. And you and I kind of talked about this. You know, I was a college athlete for a period of time. You know, I wasn't a Division I athlete, which is ultimately what helped me make my transition out, that like, hey, I'm not getting paid for this, and I've got all these other things going on. Like I need to focus on those other things. But when that happens, when you make that decision based on the logic at hand, like you're struggling with, gee, I'm a failure. You know, I'm a quitter. Like this thing has been for a lot of us, it's the most consistent thing in our lives, right? And especially at that age of 21, 22, or even younger, when people are making that decision, leaving high school, and they've been doing this thing since they were 6 years old. Like that's a huge part of their life. Like it's a major part of their life. And to walk away from that, to make that transition, you have to find a new way of relating to the world and to relating to other people and plugging into communities that support you and push you towards, you know, promising things. In your work now with other athletes or former athletes, what is some of the challenges that they're struggling with first, and what are the things that they need to do first to get themselves on a path to making that transition in a promising way, so that they can get out and succeed in other areas now that chapter of their life is done?
Right. So first of all, there's a ton of ways I can answer that question. For sake of simplicity, I think I'm going to kind of give the outline of my book and walk you through that process. That kind of covers it as an umbrella, although there are more specific challenges depending.
All right. Walk us through that. Right before we do, I know we've got Rocky watching, and we've got a couple of other folks tuning in live. Be sure to say hi in the comments, give us some likes and some loves. You know, if you're a former athlete, let us know what you did, where you played. You know, even if it was T-ball and your athletic career stopped there, let us know in the comments. If, you know, for me, that transition was made more possible by diving into my work. And there's some pluses and minuses to that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that here soon. But that's ultimately why I wanted to have Darryll on, is because, you know, whether it's sport or business is your sport and you need to transition from one failing idea so you can be successful in another, that's kind of the connection I'm trying to make here today. So again, if you've got comments, if you've got questions, let us know down in the comments below. If this is your first time watching the Business of Family and Selling, be sure to stop by startinphx.com. So startinphx.com/family. Join the community. Submit a question to be answered on a future episode of the show. And when you do that, you'll actually be entered into the 7-day sales challenge and mini course, the Double My Revenue 7-day sales challenge. So go over there, get plugged in, submit a question, accept the challenge to double your revenue. Again, that's startinphx.com/family. But Darryll, coming back to you, what is that process that you help people walk through when they're transitioning from something that has been such an anchor in their life to a whole new unknown? Where do they start?
So I say you start at acceptance. So just to lay out the 5 steps, it's acceptance, believe, discover, pursue, and persist. And I'm going to talk about each one just a little bit. Obviously, I can't cover it all. So in this acceptance stage, taking the perspective of the athlete, this is really just coming to the acceptance that the career is over, right? I forget, you've probably heard of the 5 stages of grief before, and they lay out these 5 steps that you have to go through, and the last step is acceptance. And what I talked about in the ebook is this, is like, you don't have to go through those 5 steps. I personally, when I kind of looked at my journey, I did, but the only reason why I did is because I didn't just try to accept it right off rip, and I was tugging with it. I was bargaining. I was doing those things that they say that you go through, and you really don't have to do that. You can just come to a place of acceptance. But what I think helps you get there faster as an athlete is, and this is very common, is you have to accept your accomplishments and let go of your potential. Okay. Now, if you're an athlete who has a high athletic identity, which means that you really identify with the role of an athlete. So not somebody who just knows that, they want to do other things, and athlete sports or something is just something that they do. But people who really, it becomes their identity. They identify with the athlete role. Oftentimes they see the potential of the athlete that they could be. Like, they see themselves in the Hall of Fame. They see themselves playing professionally. They see how fast they can run and how high they can jump. And they get recruited off potential. They know all this potential is inside of them. And then when your career ends, whether forced or, by choice, you still have this lingering pull of, man, I never reached my full potential. I never reach, and you cannot come to a place of acceptance if you don't let go of that potential, because you'll always in your mind feel like a failure, and you'll always subconsciously be trying to live out and convince people of what your potential was. So for me, what that looked like, now this is kind of funny, but I literally was telling everybody I know, it didn't matter if you were an athlete or a non-athlete, if you wanted to have the conversation or not have the conversation, I was going to how good I was, who I played against, like the NFL or the professional athletes, because I was also good at basketball as well. And so 2 of my favorite stories that I used to always tell in this journey, right? So I'm done with sports, and people are talking to me, just asking me what's going on with life, and somehow I direct the conversation back to sports. And so the 2 is when I played against Brandon Jennings. I think he plays for the Bucks now. I don't know. Does he still play for the Bucks? I don't know. But Brandon Jennings, I know he's still in the NBA. I played against him in high school. Okay. Now, he was ranked way higher than I was, but my AAU team was good. We went head to head, right? I outscored Brandon Jennings in my AAU game. So to me, if I outscored him, and he's in, obviously this was high school. Okay. Yeah. But if I outscored him in an AAU game in high school, and he's in the NBA now, that told me that I had the potential to play in the NBA. The other story that I used to tell all the time was the one about Draymond Green. So Draymond Green, who plays for the Golden State Warriors, went to Michigan State, plays for the Golden State Warriors. He is from the state of Michigan. Okay. Graduated the same year in high school. We played together. So senior year in high school, preseason rankings, he was ranked number 1. I was ranked number 3. It was him number 1, Brad Rutherford number 2, me number 3. Right. And so we faced off preseason. And it was like a big deal. There were some scouts there, because it was like number 1 versus number 3 guy. Let's see how they go at it. And we kind of went back and forth. You know, he scored some, I scored some. I don't know who else scored who. But I used to tell people, like, we went back and forth, man. And when I would tell them that, what I really discovered in this process was I was trying to get people to agree with me and validate the fact that I could have made it to the NFL or to play professionally. But I could never get to a place of acceptance if I didn't let that potential go and just say, listen, potential is just that. It's potential. Let me focus on accomplishments, achievements, what I actually did. And when I did that, it was this sober reality that, like, okay, yeah, I might have went back and forth with Draymond Green, but the reality is that he was in the NBA and I was at home sitting on the couch watching him play. And man, like, I know it sounds really simple, but I tell you what, it's not easy at all. I cried, I couldn't sleep, but I had to accept it. I had to let go of this potential. I had to stop convincing people of this potential. And I had to just be satisfied with my accomplishments. Because when I focused on accomplishments and not on potential, it created a sense of satisfaction. It made me excited about my experience. I could look back and be grateful for the things that I did get done on the field and off the field. But when I talked about potential, all I had was regret and remorse. And so if you're going to move forward and have the best life after sports, you've got to accept, okay? So that's acceptance. The next step is to believe in a better future, okay? Now, here's one that is a little more universal in the sense that acceptance really is a struggle for elite athletes or athletes who think in their mind that they have the potential to be elite. Belief can apply to anybody, even if you're little league, okay? Because oftentimes what I've started to discover is that there's parents who didn't make it to a certain level athletically, and they try to force that identity on their child. Like, you know, I really want my boy to play professional baseball like that. And that is, as a father, that is what's going to make me proud of my boy.
Yeah.
And so the child grows up with this belief that, man, athletics, being a professional athlete is like the best way to gain honor, validation, and respect from other people. Mm-hmm. And so what I talk about in the belief step is that you have to believe in a better future. Okay. You have to believe that there's something greater for you personally than sports. Okay. So taking this perspective of my journey, for me, even once I started to discover I had other skills and talents, athletics was still the highest that I would ever go in life because people knew me. I was on the media. ESPN covered me. I was getting featured in the newspapers and the articles. And so even though I found other skills and talents, it was like there wasn't a better future out there than sports. I was never going to discover something more fulfilling, more honoring than that role. Mm-hmm. And so I had to bring myself to a place of belief. And so personally for me, that was that moment that I talked to you about earlier in that psychiatric unit, when God saved me from suicide and introduced himself to me, because to me, that gave me a belief in a better future. Because I said, listen, if it was all about sports and sports is not an option anymore because of my injury, then clearly there's something better for me to do. And so obviously I started discovering. So that was big for me. Another one was just my peers. Okay, so maybe you haven't had that encounter with God. How do you do that? I would say my peers. And I love this quote. This is one of the quotes that I kept saying over myself. Sometimes you have to believe in somebody else's belief in you before you can believe in yourself. And so sometimes it's hard. You can't picture it. You can't envision it yourself. But oftentimes when you talk to other people, they see stuff in you that you haven't recognized yet. So for me, people would say you're inspiring. And I know, like, maybe I come off of that way now, but you got to remember, not this way. I have videos, of me speaking 4 years ago that I would be embarrassed to show people. But I want to show it to people because when they hear me speak now, they're like, oh, man, what? No, you weren't quiet. You weren't shy. You weren't timid. Yeah, I was, because confidence-wise, I was so confident as an athlete, but these other abilities were in infant form. And they haven't been developed yet. And so I was super insecure about my ability to speak. But I had to believe in God's belief in me and other people's belief in me. I had to borrow, their belief system before I could really come to a place of belief in myself. And so I cover that in the book.
Very cool.
And do you have any questions before?
Real quick, I want to throw it down. I know we've got Janine and Rocky watching. If you guys have questions, be sure to drop them in the comment, or if you have something that whether it was sport or business or something else that you had to let go of, or you're currently trying to transition from, so that you can pursue bigger and better things? I know Rocky's got plans for a business that he's taken steps towards. Janine, you and I haven't had a chance to speak, but again, drop that stuff in, or at the very least, let us know where you're tuning in from. But I guess my question is, we're talking to an audience of sellers. Some of them, like myself, grew up in athletics. And so the business and selling has become their new sport, in a way that they relate to a lot of things. But, is there something that we should be cognizant of as we pursue new dreams and new goals? As an athlete, your resource is probably, is your body and your mindset and your bandwidth.
Yeah.
As a seller, as a business owner, you're throwing your mind, your body, your bandwidth, but I mean, you can do more with less actual physical activity, right? It's a different use of your body and your mind. But then you're throwing in, the sacrifice to family time, potentially the sacrifice of, funds, actual money that has to go in, that resource that has to go into the effort of pursuing whatever this dream or this goal or this grand plan is. Should we be cognizant of where this thing ends, what the true potential is, and when we cut our losses?
Yeah. Yes. I'm glad you asked that question. I do talk about that in those steps. I just didn't get to that particular portion. But to me, one of the most helpful things, because I did go into fundraising, I went into marketing, which became, like you said, my new sport. And one of the hardest things I think for people who are in business, and maybe as a former athlete, is recognizing that there's even an issue. Because you can be so driven and so used, because sometimes as an athlete, you develop great work habits. You know how to like get up and work hard, even if you got to do like a 2-a-day workout, your day is going to be sucky. Mentally, you can be a positive person and get through your day. But on the inside, there may be this turmoil going on that you've suppressed it so deep inside you don't even know it's there. And so I think one of the challenges is identifying that there's even an issue with your belief or your identity as a former athlete. And one of the ways that you can tell, okay, and I talk about this in the ebook, is talk about your athletic career and then talk about your current job now. And then pay attention to how excited you are when you talk about each. For people who don't even know it's an issue, that is the number one way. They're like, oh man, something's drastically different. When they talk about sports,
sure,
their face is lit up. They're like, man, because in their mind, this is awesome. And they talk about now, it's just like, ugh. Oh, but that shows me that I have this internal, deep-seated belief that sports is so much more awesome than what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. And what a horrible way to live, man.
What if somebody is like, okay, this thing is done, I need to let go of that potential? Is replacing that, like, what if they're so consumed by their potential? How do they get their mind off of that? How do they go about finding what is the next chapter of their life?
Yep. So you're kind of one foot in one chapter, another foot in the other. One foot is still that acceptance step. One thing that I'd encourage people to do as an action step is to write down your potential what your potential as an athlete was. So you had the potential to be a legend, a Hall of Famer, to break this record, to do this thing, and then share that with somebody. Get it off your chest. Just let it out there, okay? And then begin to look at your accomplishments and find a way to find satisfaction in that, okay? So, again, share that with somebody. Don't leave it in the dark. Don't just try to force yourself to believe in something else. Mm-hmm. Let it off your chest, okay?
Okay.
And then when you get into discovering that new thing, I think, yes, you do need to obviously find something else to do. But what I advise you to do is don't just find something, find your purpose. Okay. And for me, obviously I got into work and I was doing marketing consulting. I was doing marketing work at Central Michigan University. It was a paying job. It was good benefits. There was room for advancement. Everything looked good on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't my purpose. I had something else to devote myself to. I mean, I talked to you about this on the phone, but and I don't know if any of my friends are watching. If so, they might watch the replay. But they'll tell you, so this is an office picture, a typical 9 to 5, a university setting. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
professional. They're dressed
Mm-hmm.
in the attire. And I've got them all doing push-ups and like I'm bringing it in saying, all right, 1, 2, 3, let's do this. And we're chanting. And I'm trying to turn this environment into like something more exciting. And I realized that, man, listen, this is not my purpose. I can be, no matter how hard I push at being successful at it, it doesn't give me a resolve. It doesn't give me, it's just not my purpose. It's the best way to say it. And so I don't just encourage you to find something else to keep yourself busy. I encourage you to find your purpose. Okay. Yeah.
Do you often find yourself helping folks walk through that? How do you find that purpose? What does searching look like? And it sounds like it would take work. So what does the work look like to find your purpose?
Man, that's the golden ticket right there. And if you pay attention to what's going on in the world, everyone's talking about purpose right now because I mean, there's so many books about quitting your day job to your dream job,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's talking about it because I think people are beginning to realize that if I don't find purpose in what I do, I'm going to be miserable on the
Mm-hmm.
inside. Okay, I might have a
Mm-hmm.
good check, good money, nice things, but on the inside, I'm not going to feel purpose. Even if you find like something in a nonprofit to do,
Mm-hmm.
if that's not your purpose, you might like feel good about yourself, but you're still going to have some inward unsatisfaction because there's more something different out there for you to do that you can't even describe.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's my take on that step. Okay. Traditional wisdom would say this. It would say, write out a list of skills and start to follow, what you're good at. Okay.
Yeah.
Or it would say, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? And I think that is a great question to ask. Here's where I bring my perspective into it because I did those things and I still was confused.
Yeah.
Okay. They did give me some clarity, like if it was a lens and it focused in a little bit, but it was still blurry to me.
Okay.
And what helped it clear is I asked myself this question: what am I after?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I wrote out my skills and ability. Okay. I had kind of a skill to speak, even though I was timid and afraid. I knew that I liked working with people, but I started to ask myself, what am I after? What am I really trying to accomplish by doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what kind of helped me discover that purpose. So for me, when I asked myself, what am I trying to accomplish by this passion, by this skill set, by this desire to do a thing? And I discovered that for me, I was really trying to help people live in the abundance mindset. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's why that's important in this step for me. Okay. Because if you just focus on a passion, you limit yourself to one area. Okay. So for me, if I would have just focused on speaking, I would have limited myself to that. Okay. But if I broadened my purpose to be about helping people experience abundance, I can do that through speaking. I can do that through writing. I can do that through multiple different manifestations because it's all underneath the umbrella of helping people experience abundance. Okay. And it made so much sense to me because especially if you're entrepreneurial, you have a lot of different passions. Okay. So I wanted to speak. I wanted to speak on the topics. I wanted to start an orphanage. I wanted to help people who are struggling financially to come out of poverty. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Which one is my purpose? And the reality is that all of it's my purpose.
Yeah.
It's all helping people experience abundance.
Yeah.
And so, man, when I almost ran when I found that out. And I'm not going to say I did it alone. I've done it through a number of things. My pastor, Bishop Travis Hall, was very helpful in me discovering that. He has a blog, cultivatemypurpose.com. He has an article on there that has, I think, 11 questions to discover your purpose. Very helpful to go through. Another experience that I went through was a company called Leader Shape. They take you through this 7-day journey of basically this, what they call developing a healthy disregard for the impossible. Essentially discovering your purpose.
Yeah.
And so I took that.
I don't know. You're kind of in and out on my end, Darryll.
As well as my own journey, and I kind of just meshed it into like.
Kind of in and out. I don't know. You kind of cut out there, Darryll. I'm seeing.
You got me now?
I can hear you. I can't quite see you, but
I'm good on my end.
Okay. Well, still frozen on my end. But what I don't know, like it sounds like, I don't know, I sit here and I'm eating up everything that you have to say. I mean, the excitement that you have behind the work that you're doing now seems like that's what you need to have to be good at anything. And I mean, you're preaching to the choir. You know, the 7-day sales challenge that I have for folks to walk through, like it starts at that same point. What's important to you? What are you good at? What do you really want to accomplish? Okay, let's focus on that and do the how in service of that why, in service of that purpose. You know, a lot of the folks watching here, they've got families, either they've got a dedicated partner, they're married, soon to be married, or they got kids. That's probably part of the why, and now they need to organize the hows, or they've been doing a how and now it's not aligned with who they are at home anymore, and so they need to retool. So I guess this is as good a time as any for the shameless plug of the start of the Double My Revenue 7-Day Sales Challenge, right? Yeah. You know, so if this is the first time that you're stopping by the Business of Family and Selling, be sure to stop by startinphx.com. So startinphx.com/family. Over there, you can join the community, get updates of future episodes, get recordings of past episodes, other exciting content that we have coming out about being a family-oriented seller, somebody who works in sales or has a business or works for themselves, basically somebody who's responsible for revenue, but also wants to be a superhero, rock star back at home to their spouse, to their kids, what have you. Be sure to stop over there, startinphx.com/family, get plugged in. You can submit questions to be answered on future episodes of the show. If you're watching us live, comments, questions below the video here. If you're watching later today, tomorrow, weeks from now, a year from now, tag myself, tag Darryll. If you got questions, we'll circle back. We'll answer those questions as best we can. But again, startinphx.com/family is another great place to submit questions to make sure they get answered live on video by future guests. Plus, you get access to the 7-Day Sales Challenge, which again starts with this idea of why, who, what's important, what am I after? You know, I could do all of these things and I could sell all of these things, but if I'm not excited about it, if I don't see how it directs towards my why or my my general purpose for life and for being and for raising my family and for, having this business or being in sales, you're probably not going to be all that good at it. Right. What are your takes on the role of excitement in transition and just being good at the thing you choose to be good to do?
Yeah. That is a great segue into my next step, which is to pursue. I don't know if you're going to like this, but again, from that athlete's perspective, I don't know if I've ever been around an environment more exciting than an athletic arena. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've been around some tier moments, concerts and things like that. But the athletic arena where you've got people cheering for you, you've got the band playing, you've got media. I mean, you've got it's so full of energy and that excitement and that drive that it's easy to be motivated. They call it home court advantage. Mm-hmm. So what I tell athletes to do, because one of the things that is a challenge is that the 9-to-5 or even an entrepreneurial endeavor nothing can compare to that environment. So here's what I tell people: use motivation as an ignition, not as a fuel. Okay. Now, I know that's why I said you're not going to like this. For the non-athlete, I think it's easier for you to kind of stay motivated throughout the day. But from an athlete's perspective, nothing is more motivating than that band playing, okay, than that music going. And so unless there's music going, smoke going, and again, you can talk to my team at Central Michigan University. They would talk about an event that they wanted to have for students, and they would say, what should we do? Should we do, balloons and this? I'm like, get a smoke machine. Because I'm like, man, this is exciting. Nothing beats this. And I was trying to use motivation as a fuel, and it was running out fast. Like I would take breaks just to listen to something motivational to get myself to operate off of motivation. Yeah. But you've got to find something deeper than a physiological motivation. Okay. Because there's going to be some days, Brendan, where you do not feel motivated.
I've been there myself.
You have to make the choice to give excellence, even when you don't feel like it. When there's no band playing, when the workplace is confusing, when you haven't made any sales, when you made 25 sales calls and nobody answers, you have to still keep doing it with a smile on your face, with the same energy, without the motivation. Because motivation can get you started, but it cannot keep you going. So that's my take.
I'm blanking on the name now, but motivation and bathing, like, they only last for so long. That's why they recommend it daily, right?
That's right.
So like motivation can get you going in the morning, but there has to be something fueling your motivational habits, because like, again, you still got to strike the match, right? If you don't have it in you to strike the match, to get the thing going, to get you to show up for those moments, the thing is going to fall apart. And I don't know why you thought I wouldn't agree with you, because I absolutely do agree with you. Okay. Awesome. it has to come from a foundation of something that excites you. And I think knowing your why, knowing your greater purpose makes these hows just make sense. All these things that whether you're speaking or you're consulting or you're providing some other type of service, whatever it happens to be that you choose to do in pursuit of your higher purpose, your higher being, like, that's what's going to get you to strike the match every morning or every week or however frequently you have to do it to again put one step in front of the other to make it happen. Right. Now we've only got about 10 minutes left. Okay. So why don't we circle back into who are the folks you're focused on helping right now? Is it athletes and business owners? Is it athletes purely? Is it the coaches who see this issue with their athletes who aren't going to make it to the next level? Who are you focused on helping today?
Yeah, I think my focus is my greatest burden right now is former athletes. Nobody is pursuing. Okay. So there's a lot of NFL athletes. There's services out there. But a lot of them focus on helping an athlete basically become a motivational speaker or use their athletic kind of tout or pool to create a career out of it. To me, that doesn't separate the athlete role. To me, that's just making a positive out. And I think that's fine. I'm cool. If that's what your purpose is, do it by all means. But there's a ton, literally millions every year who are forgotten about either because they're not elite or they're too far removed from the elite to even be cared about. So that's my true burden. Okay. Now I haven't reached a lot of those people yet. And I'll tell you why, because they're hard to find. They're like off the grid, like who knows where they are once they're not in the spotlight. And so I've been working with a lot of current athletes and just preparing them for the transition, getting them to think about some of these things. So even just from that acceptance step, I tell them, okay, this is a motivator to give it everything that you got while you're in your sport, because you don't want to live with regret afterwards. It's a lot easier to accept my accomplishments and let go of my potential when I know that I left it all on the field. Okay. And so that brings a new internal motivator to athletes, current athletes, versus because all coaches say it, but they say it because they want to win games. And I'm telling the athlete to say it so that you can set your future self up for success, even if you retire at the age of 65. You understand? And so to answer your question, it's my burden is for former athletes, the unforgotten, and then my current people who I'm working with right now are a ton of current athletes, high school, college, a lot of college, a few professionals.
Gotcha. I want to ask you, because as you were speaking, these folks who are off the grid, and when you think about the mental health concern of folks who are contemplating suicide, who are self-medicating, they're probably in a lot of ways being deceptive. So the people that are closest to them don't always know, how attached they are to that result that they perceive as failure and how it's tearing them up inside. How can parents, spouses, whether they have an athlete in the home or, it's somebody who's dealing with a business issue, what are some of the things that they should be cognizant of that might be a sign that, hey, we need to dive into this, and then maybe we need to get help outside the home or outside of this circle? We need professional assistance with the circumstance.
Man, that's a wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked that. I gave a clue earlier when I talked about athletes not knowing that they're struggling, to be able to identify that by monitoring the conversation. And so I would take that to answer your question and say this: don't wait for them to come to you. You go to them. Mm-hmm. Okay. Even if you don't perceive there to be a problem, because you got to remember, as an athlete, typically you're a role model and you're taught to be tough. You're taught that people are always watching you and following you. And so you're not really encouraged to share weakness. And so they might not even feel comfortable or know how to do that as an athlete, male or female. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, as a parent or as a coach, knowing a former athlete, I would just have that conversation. I would literally take the initiative and I would say, hey, how you doing with not playing anymore? And literally that's what I do now. When I talk to current former athletes, like some of my peers that I play with, that they seem to be doing fine, I just say, hey, how you doing with not playing anymore? Oh man, I'm cool. This happened and, that didn't work out and my agent didn't call me back and yada, yada, yada. How you feel about that? And the more that they talk about it, the more I see their emotions start to well up. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's something there. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, take the initiative. Don't wait for them to come to you. You go to them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd probably add to that, if you're living with the person or they really are that close to you, it's a family member, there's none of this quality time without the quantity time. You have to put yourself in proximity to them to let those conversations happen organically, because if you try to run at them full steam ahead, we're going to open up this problem today, like you put it on the calendar, there's going to be some resistance. There's going to be some walls put up and masks worn to prevent you from doing that. So proximity, give yourself time to have these conversations. Don't just try to schedule it for a half an hour after lunch on a Thursday. But Darryll, I have one more question for you. I want to ask, you're a marketer, you've got a consulting business, you're out there providing services to help athletes and sell yourself as a speaker. So I do want to ask you what your number one tip for family first sellers is. Before we do that, I want to hear, where can people connect with you? Where can they find out more about you? Where can they find your content, and where can they, reach out to you most easily?
Yeah, I would say my social media pages. So my Facebook's just my name, Darryll Stinson. My Instagram, my Twitter are dstinson97, and that was my football number, 97. And so you can reach me that way. I do send out an email pretty regularly. Email me at darryllstinson@gmail.com. I'll be happy to throw you into the loop. Again, I'm getting ready to put the website up and get all that stuff going, but that's being built right now currently.
Very cool.
As far as if you're talking about the marketing consultant thing, I do have that website up. That's stinsontransformational.com, and you can reach me for that area there.
Awesome. So I want to wrap up with this last question. Before I do, again, if this is your first time watching The Business of Family and Selling, be sure to say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If any of this stuff puzzles you, you got questions, or you can relate to it, let us know in the comments. Whether you're watching it live now and, just as we're wrapping up, or you're watching it a day from now, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, if you got questions, tag myself, tag Darryll. We'll circle back. We'll get your questions answered. Another great place to submit questions to be answered live in the interviews is startinphx.com. So startinphx.com/family. And when you submit a question, you'll actually be given access to the Double My Revenue 7-Day Sales Challenge as well. And that'll walk you through some of this stuff from a business context and a sales context that we've been talking about, zeroing in on your greater purpose. Once you've focused on that, in the world of business, what you should be selling, who you should be selling it to, how you should be going about selling. So again, it's in service of that greater thing so that you can be excited about it and you don't have to worry about the limited reach of momentum leaving you short, coming up short. So again, startinphx.com/family, submit a question for a future episode, join the community, accept the challenge to double your revenue. But coming back to you, Darryll, one last question. What is your number one tip for family first sellers?
Don't fail at the same role consecutively. So as a family first seller, you have multiple roles that you play in life. You're a father, you're a parent, you have your work role. You may have other hobbies. You may, you're a son or a daughter. You have all these roles that you have to play that pull for your attention. And I think there's a false truth that somehow you can create this magical balance where everything gets the equal amount of time and energy. I haven't found that to be true. What I would say is just don't fail at the same role consecutively. So, man, if you did a lot of work today, wasn't the best parent or the best husband, then just make sure that you don't do that for too many consecutive days in a row.
That's awesome.
That would be
people in business, especially people who are responsible for leading with revenue, we're high achievers. We want to excel in that area. It's similar with athletes. Truth be told, your personal life and your family life, along with all these other things, are like balls that you're juggling, right? But that personal aspect, that family aspect, that's like a glass ball. If you drop it, it shatters, it's over. Sports, business, clients, they're like rubber balls. You can drop them once or twice and they'll bounce back into the rotation and you'll be able to survive. You keep you don't pick it back up right away and let another ball drop and bounce. Eventually it won't bounce back up. So don't fail consecutively. I love that, Darryll. Yes, awesome. So thanks again for joining me, Darryll. It was a pleasure. I think, the work that you're doing is important and meaningful. So thank you for sharing it with us. Again, for the folks who are watching us live, let us know where you're at. Say hi in the comments. If you're catching it on the replay, welcome to the after party. Same rules apply. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Ask your questions. Again, startinphx.com/family is another great way to get plugged in and ask questions to be answered on a future episode of the show. And until next time, I'm Brendan Allen Barrett. This was The Business of Family and Selling. Take care.